The Thargoids are moving ever closer, destroying stations in their wake. But what have humankind done to make the Thargoids so angry? Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Elite Dangerous with Down to Earth Astronomy. It's once again time to dive into the lore of Elite, and today we're going to focus on the Thargoid-human interactions. There's a lot to talk about the Thargoids, so today I'm going to focus specifically on their interactions with human and our interactions with them. Of course, before we start, I should say that there may be spoilers in this video, so if you want to discover all this stuff on your own, you should probably pause the video now and go and find something else to watch. But let's get started. Now, we're going to go fairly briefly through the beginning of the Thargoids. They seem to have existed for millions of years. The Thargoids even predates the Guardians. I mean, they seem to have been a spacefaring race even before the Guardians existed. So the Thargoids are old. They have been around for a very, very long time. Now, the first ever small rumor we had with any kind of signs of Thargoids is from the year 2810. There were some unconfirmed encounters that, now looking back at them, definitely seemed like a Thargoid attack, but back then it was hushed down and not a whole lot seemed to have come out of it. But first time we got some real confirmation of some actual human Thargoid encounters was around the years 3120s. So this is, compared to where the game is now, almost 200 years ago. So it's quite a long time ago. Back then it started with reports of octagonal ships, and some ships were also beginning to report malfunctioning hyperdrives and other strange things happening. And in the year 3123, a damaged ship was discovered, and back then it was reported to being destroyed by very powerful laser weapons. Way more powerful laser weapons than were available for humans at the time. So it was quite puzzling for people. The rumors or the encounters were very scarce, and many people at the time just shook it off as weird rumors, and the malfunctions were old ships, I guess, or poorly manufactured ships. Not many people took much notice of it. It was kind of looked up and kind of like a Bigfoot kind of thing. Like, some people would definitely believe, yes, there are aliens out there, they are attacking our ships, while others would just say, yeah, you go and you look for your aliens, that's fine, and they just shook it off as nothing really. Now, today we know that is not really what happened. Today we know that back then in the 3120s, there was an organization created called INRA. This was a collaboration between the Federation and the Empire. And they seem to have been very effective back then as keeping this secret and dealing with it as a shadow organization, an underground organization that many people didn't really knew much of. Now, the INRA organization are of course the one who developed the Mycoid virus. And if you don't know what the Mycoid virus, I'll come to that now. It was a bioweapon that was designed, at least it was what it was told it should do, to disable the basically the frameshift drive in Thargoid ships. There was a lot of the researchers at the time that left the project because they were using some rather unethical methods. And here I'm talking testing on live specimens. They somehow managed to get a hold. I guess they would have gotten hold of something like the Thargoid sensors or something else like that. That is still a living thing, and I guess they would be testing it on that. But a lot of the scientists around that time didn't really like that, so they left the project. But even though they still did manage to develop this Mycoid virus, and they recruited a commander named John Jameson, which you might have heard of. Now, he was recruited to fly out with a ship, deliver this new weapon to a Thargoid mothership, and return, as he was told. He opted to take his own ship, but INRA did modify it a bit for the task before he took off. When he left, I think they were hoping he would succeed, of course, but they didn't really expect it. But Jameson actually did manage to deliver the weapon successfully. And after the weapon was delivered, he could see that the weapon was not just disabling the frameshift drive as he has been told. It was in fact killing every single Thargoid it came in contact with. This was basically like a plague for Thargoids on steroids. This thing was deadly to the Goids. And after he found that out, he also discovered something else that was rather going to be rather important for the rest of his life, which is going to be really short, because INRA has also altered his ship as part of the modifications they put up. They didn't really expect him to return from this mission, but they did put in a failsafe, so in the really, really unlikely chance that he would succeed and actually would escape the Thargoid mothership after the weapon was delivered, his ship would log on to the nearest planet, go full speed and crash into it. So that is why, as many of you will know, there is now a Jameson's crashed Cobra. And it is that Cobra that was used in the original attack on the Thargoid mothership to deliver the Mycoid virus. You can go there now if you want to, and you can still listen into the audio logs. It's quite interesting if you want a little bit more in depth. You can hear his own small diary of the events of what happened. If we fast forward here, this was all happening, as I said, in the 3120s. So if you fast forward about 30 years to 3151, all Thargoids seem to have left human space. There were no sight of them. They seem to have disappeared. The threat was evaded, and humankind was once again safe. Obviously, a lot of all this stuff was happening in a lot of secrecy, and not a lot of people really knew about them. I think at the time most people knew that the Thargoids were there, but from the public view, they just disappeared again for some odd reason, and nobody really knew. This was really kept as a secret, at least back then. So once again, let's fast forward a little bit, about 150 years, and we're going to move forward to the year 3301. We are now in almost the present era. This is at least when After Elite Dangerous was launched, and in the era that we are playing in now. And in 3301, we got the first sign of the Thargoids returning. An object called an unknown artifact was discovered. This is what is now has been renamed to the Thargoid Center, but back then we didn't know what it was, and it was just named an unknown artifact. A small little fun side note: so if you ever see a reference to UA bombing, that reference a UA unknown artifact, and because if you sold them to a station, you could completely disable the station because it would get all messed up due to all the Thargoid activity in the station. So that was called UA bombing, basically destroying stations by selling unknown artifacts to it. But those were the first signs that there were Thargoids about to return. Of course, back then there were a lot of discussions whether this was from a different alien race or if this was from indeed the Thargoids again. The year later, in 3302, the first barnacle sites were discovered, and I'm going to come back to those as well in a bit. And on the 5th of January 3303, we had the first hyperdiction, meaning the first time a commander was pulled out of witch space and dropped into normal space, scanned by Thargoids. At this point, they were still really passive, but it was the first time that we actually saw a Thargoid ship. But again, they're really passive. They weren't really aggressive. They weren't really attacking anything. They were pretty much just sizing us up, see what kind of technology we had, how far we had evolved since the last time they were around. And over the coming months, more hyperdictions were happening in mostly around the Pleiades sector, and we're beginning to see destroyed ships that had this residue on the surface being so the indication that they've been attacked by Thargoids. Mega ships were suddenly being attacked, and it all developed into now stations being attacked in the Pleiades sector, and now that attack has slowly been moving towards the core of human space to pretty much where we are today, where a ton of stations are burning in the bubble, and even more are still under repair from previous attacks. But it still begs the question, which we started with at the beginning of the video. Why? Why are the Thargoids so mad at us? And it actually comes down all the way back to the start, and we have to look at the Thargoids as a very they're a very territorial race. For them, this is their space. The place we live, they see this as their space. As I said, they're really, really old. So for them, a project that lasts 2,000 or 3,000 years is nothing. So what the Thargoid seems to do is they seed planets with these barnacle sites. These barnacle sites, they collect resources from the planets to build these meta-alloys, which the Thargoid seems to use as building materials. We don't really know what they're using it for, but at least they seem to want those. They seem to be something that they are interested in. And I think one of the problems was that, so the Thargoids come into what is now known as the human bubble. They seed a lot of, or at least the Pleiades sector, they seed a lot of these planets for resource gathering. Then they come back a few thousand years later and then they discover that suddenly this annoying human race is like infested basically the farm. And that makes them a little bit angry. And that was the thing why we had the first attacks back then. Back in 31, like 20-ish. That was the original reason for the attacks back then. That they weren't too happy with us running around in what they considered their space. But I think this time around, I still think they're definitely still annoyed that we are around. But you could also imagine that this would pretty much be a revenge attack from after we launched that Mycoid virus and pretty much committed genocide on the whole race. Which you kind of can understand why they would get so mad at us. And of course there's also a whole interactions with the Thargoids and the Guardians, but I'm not going to dive into that today. But the story is almost the same, that the Thargoids have seeded the area, the Guardians were suddenly, they come back, the Guardians were suddenly there, and the Thargoids got a little annoyed and began attacking them, even though the Guardians actually managed to get a method of communicating with them. They learned the Thargoid language, they learned to talk to them, but to no avail. The Thargoids seems to be hellbound on just destroying them. And that was the whole Thargoid Guardian War, how that started. So the story kind of repeats themselves. Suddenly some race pops up in what they consider their space, and the Thargoids find that very annoying. So that is why the Thargoids seem to be so hellbound on destroying humankind. To be honest, I can't blame them, but I'm still not too pleased with them running around inside the bubble, destroying stations left and right. So anyway, that was pretty much a brief overview of the human Thargoid interactions and the lore of the Thargoids. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, give a like, subscribe to the channel, and until next time, I'll see you guys in space.